Let the torch of freedom burn.
President Thomas Jefferson said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power."
Welcome to the intersection of faith and the culture. You have found the right place if you are looking for a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective on all the hot issues of the day. WallBuilders Live is all about that. Now, that name WallBuilders comes from that scripture in Nehemiah that says, "Arise and rebuild the walls that we may no longer be a reproach." Think about that history, folks. Think about it. When a culture, when that defense mechanism, when that wall around that city was destroyed in those Old Testament days, you were run over. I mean, you could not survive as a nation or as a culture. In our society today, in the world today, if you lose the foundation, if you lose the principles of your nation, you will not survive. And there are definitely cracks in the foundation of America. There are consistent attacks on the American value system, on the American founding documents. And therefore, we must be the ones to arise and rebuild the walls, rebuild the foundation, rebuild the principles that made America the greatest nation in the history of the world. Without any question, the most powerful, most benevolent, most free, and don't forget that benevolence part. There's such a great American story that needs to be told, and we need to teach these principles of liberty to the rising generation. You can be a part of that. That's what we do at WallBuilders, and you can be a part of it by sharing our program. You can go to wallbuilderslive.com today and use social media tools to share the programs that we air. Today is Foundations of Freedom Thursday, so it's a great program to air because we're taking your questions. A great program to share. It is a great program to air, but it's also a great program to share, and so we encourage you to do that today, but also to look in those archives at wallbuilderslive.com and share some of those programs with others as well. And while you're there at wallbuilderslive.com, make sure that you also consider a contribution. That button's right there on the homepage. It's a way for you to come alongside us, not only in sharing the program, but helping to get the program on more stations, helping us with our training of pastors and legislators and young leaders, all the different things we're doing to restore America's constitutional republic. You can be a part of it by making that donation at wallbuilderslive.com. All right, David, Tim, first question of the day has to do with something I think is on a lot of people's minds right now. In fact, I think we've gotten several questions on this, but the one that made the show is from Robin out of Prattville, Alabama. I don't know where that is. Prattville. Either of y'all know where that is?
It's in Alabama.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah.
Alabama.
Nice. Yeah, I should have known better. Okay, the question is, does the president have any power to stop the mail-in vote? So this opens up a whole can of worms, guys. We got, is this mail-in ballots a good idea? Can the president stop it? What happens if they are late? I just am tossing it all out to you. What do you want to hit first?
Let's start with the background to the whole thing, because what's happened is there's been 3 stimulus bills on the coronavirus type stuff, and as they're working on another one now, nearly nothing in the bill relates to the coronavirus effect. It's all going for social programs, everything else.
Are you suggesting Nancy Pelosi is not as concerned with coronavirus as she is with her own projects?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm blatantly saying that. I'm blatantly saying that.
You mean politicians are using crisis for their political advantage and not actually trying to help resolve the situation? I'm shocked right now.
It's never happened before last week. Well, maybe the week before. Well, yeah, all the time. So she's got this deal of she wants all of her pet projects, and Trump has said, no, if it's not related to virus, we're not going to do it. And so part of what they've now wanted is they want $25 billion to bail out the post office, which I find really kind of a fascinating, intriguing thing. How long have we been making jokes about the Postal Service and about how bad it is? I mean, I
think my whole life. No kidding.
And she wants to fall on a sword over the Postal Service. But then it turns out that they want an additional $3.6 billion to give to states to do mail-in ballots. And so they're into this thing of everything in the election needs to be a mail-in ballot. And Trump has said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to release $25 million out of the funds I've got to bail out the post office. It's an incompetent organization, and we're not doing $3.6 billion more to help states do mail-in ballots. That's up to them. So now this is so bad in her mind that she's turned Congress loose. What were they doing? They were meeting once a month and having proxy votes and everything. She just didn't want Congress in town. And so she's calling them back into town to be here to deal with this crisis that Trump has created by not extending post office money and not giving mail-in ballot kind of stuff. So that's the drama over what's going on right now is, Democrats really big time want mail-in ballots, and by and large, Republicans don't, and they sure don't want to be the ones to pay for all the mail-in ballots. I've got this article from the Washington Post that kind of covers the tiff that's going on. On the one hand, you've got Democrats saying we want mail-in balloting for everybody. And on the other side, you've got Trump saying, no, we don't want mail-in balloting for everyone. So it's going back and forth. What really struck me was in reading this Washington Post article, they lay out the two sides. And the way they lay out the two sides, they said that on the one side, there's nearly 180 million Americans eligible to vote by mail, but the president's actions could usher in widespread delays, long lines, and voter disenfranchisement this fall, according to voting rights advocates. So if Trump gets his way, according to voting rights advocates, what you're going to be facing is long delays in voting. You're going to have long lines, and you're going to have a whole lot of people who are not able to vote this fall if they don't get to do mail-in balloting.
So without mail-in ballotings, it'll slow the process down. Now, I just want to stop there for a second. Because everything that we've seen would seem to indicate, if you use the post office, you can just expect there's going to be some delays. And we've already even seen some of the breakdown in states where states have said, hey, we can't send out ballots until so many days before the election, but then you need to allow extra days for them to resubmit it, where in some states it was 3 days after the election was before the ballot would even come back. And then you need to wait a couple of weeks to be able to process and count all the ballots. So this is what states are already acknowledging. The U.S. Post Office and those states are already acknowledging that we cannot meet the time frame required to do mail-in ballots. And Trump's saying that this would be disastrous, that there would be all kinds of cheating that would take place. And that's why he opposes it, is it would slow it down and it would cause cheating. And they're saying, if you don't do this, if you don't do mail-in ballots, then you're cheating people and it'll make it take longer. No. Mail-in ballots allow for more cheating and will take so much longer. In fact, even if you look at several of these states, there's evidence from the post office in those states.
Time out. I have this Washington Post article in my hands, and they say there is no evidence. As a matter of fact, after having given the side of the voting rights advocates, as they call them, they then returned to Trump, and they said, Trump's purpose to prevent the expansion of mail balloting, he has repeatedly claimed without evidence would invite widespread voter fraud. Now, this is interesting to me because they say Trump's claim has no evidence, and all the voting rights people, this is what's going to cost, but they don't demand evidence from them. So if Trump's going to say it, we say you've got no evidence. But Tim, you just mentioned there's evidence. As a matter of fact, as I was reading this article, I thought of something we had seen. It's this op-ed that came out, looks like about 3 weeks ago. It says, New Jersey's all-mail vote debacle is a warning for November. So what happened was in New Jersey, the governor, Phil Murphy, he ordered that the May 12th elections that they were having back then all be done entirely by mail. Now, they've never done that before in New Jersey, but it's all going to be mail. And so this was May 12th. Well, here we are now 3 months later. So what they have found so far is that on that May 12th, 20% of all ballots were rejected. In addition to 20% being rejected, they have thousands that have been disqualified, and they have so much voter fraud that they've already prosecuted 4 officials for voter fraud, big time on this. This is stuff they haven't had in New Jersey before. And so they're talking huge numbers. A bunch of voters reported they never even received the mail-in ballots, but it shows them as having voted. So they show us having voted, and they say, I never even got a ballot. So there's fraud on that aspect. State law forbids any bundling, and this is something we talked about 2 years ago, bundling, the states that allow bundling, where someone can go in and collect everybody else's ballot and turn it in for them. New Jersey doesn't allow that, except people were doing that. They found 800 ballots bundled together in one group, 400 in one group, 360 more were stuffed in one mailbox. So you've got people going around harvesting these ballots and getting what they want on the results and turning them in. So you've got New Jersey already. First time they try, you've got 20% of the ballots being rejected. That sounds to me like voter disenfranchisement, but advocates say that having mail-in balloting is going to eliminate that. Well, that's not the case. Then we've got this one from Madison, Wisconsin. They also tried absentee ballot voting, and the post office had to call in the inspector general because they were having so much postal problems. And the inspector general talks about the thousands of votes that did not get cast because of the incompetency of the post office. And they point to 4 things: that the ballots did not get the voters on time to be able to vote. The second thing that the postal inspector general points out is that a lot of the ballots were misdelivered to the wrong place. And then there were postmark problems, and then there were just flat ballots that just didn't even make it where they're supposed to go. So there's the Postal Service saying that mail-in ballots is a real problem for us. Then you get to New York City. And in New York City, they had their mail-in ballots, and again, this is new for them. June the 23rd is when they had their primary.
And when you say mail-in ballots is new for them, not new in the sense of absentee ballots, because absentee ballots have been around for a long time, where if you know you're going to be out of state, if you're traveling, if it's military and they're deployed, absentee voting has been around a long time. But now we're not talking about absentee voting where you actually have to have your voter ID number. And there is an actual process involved where you are confirming who the person is and that this is the person actually voting, et cetera, et cetera. There's not the same level of measures and balances with this broad mail-in voting that we're just sending one to everybody's mailbox. And if there's a couple people living in your house of voting age, we're going to send a couple to your mailbox and you give it to those people. There's not the same level of accountability, checks, balances, measures, whatever the case is.
That's right.
So it's not absentee voting. That's totally different. This is a mail-in ballot that goes to everybody who has a name anywhere in the county of voting age. Totally different, and that's where you're seeing so many problems.
And New York is another one. In New York, they had to toss out 20% of the mail-in voting ballots they had there. And even with that, 6 weeks after the election, they still don't have the results yet. They're not announcing the results of the election 6 weeks afterwards. So, imagine going through a presidential election where 6 weeks afterwards, you still can't announce who the winner is because they're all mail-in ballots.
And this would be different than something like in Georgia, where Stacey Abrams was defeated in her race for governor by tens of thousands of votes, and she's claiming to be the governor. Well, this would be even more chaotic because now it's not as clear as you lost by tens of thousands, or in a presidential race, maybe you lost by millions or electoral college votes, whatever the case is. Now, we don't even know what the votes are. And so how would you even assign electoral college votes if you don't know how the votes in the state happen? And so this is a disastrous thought at what people are arguing now is the best solution. It's not faster. It does allow for a lot more ballot harvesting, voter fraud, where there will be a lot more deception. There will be cheating. It will last much longer. This is a terrible idea. And as many people have argued, if you're able to get out and go to the grocery store, if you're able to get out and go to the gas station, if you're able to get out and do anything else in your life, you're able to go vote, which arguably is more important than many of those other things that people are going and doing. We can absolutely go and vote. I've seen some funny things that people have suggested. Maybe just let Chick-fil-A be one of the poll sites, right? They can process you. It's safe. It's easy. It's fast. It'll work really, really well. I'm not totally against that idea. I think they probably could do a really good job with that. But the fact is, it is possible to vote in person. It is possible to social distance. It's possible to be safe. And it's possible to make this effective. That's unfortunately not what a lot of people are looking for right now. It does seem that a lot of people want the chaos, want the confusion, so they can continue to blame Trump. They continue to promote Marxist and socialist ideologies and ultimately try to fundamentally change and destroy America, which it seems to be what much more of this is about than actually giving integrity to the voters and the voting system of America.
Yeah, because, I've got a lot of other articles here, other cities, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia. A lot of these big cities are having the same problems with huge disenfranchisement, with corruption, with throwing out 20% of the ballots, with on it goes. And for Democrats to be saying this is what we have to do, and for Trump to say, no, this is not what we want to do. And then the Washington Post says, well, there's no evidence for Trump's position. Oh, my gosh, there's evidence all over the United States for Trump's position. But that's what really makes this debate interesting. And so now you've got this stalemate where Trump is saying, I'm not going to give $25 billion to the Postal Service. They're incompetent anyway. Their own Inspector General is saying that they can't deliver the ballots and do a good job. And then you want another $3.6 billion for states, and state after state after state that's doing this for the first time. Massive problems. Doesn't make sense.
And the idea that Trump's against the post office is a little silly too, because even though I would argue maybe he is, and maybe we all should be a little more against the post office as far as the organization, the operation, how it's structured, Trump's already given them $10 billion in bailout this year and is set to continue to give them more. The post office is not a good business model. They're not making money. If it wasn't for Amazon, they wouldn't be making hardly any deliveries right now, apart from maybe political ads. The post office is not the same functionality, common sense organization it used to be. It's not working very well. But this idea that Trump's just against the post office, no. Trump's already given them $10 billion this year in a bailout just for operating, having nothing to do with the elections. But saying that now we need to dump incredible amounts of money into the post office to make the election better, the post office is not what's going to make the election better. It would make this much more disastrous, complicated, and dramatic.
As we're going to break, I just got to just think practically out there, folks. If these stories that David and Tim just shared from Wisconsin to the other places where it's been a total abject failure and nightmare, if that's not enough for you, just think about that moment when you're mailing something that's really important to you and you want to make sure it gets to somebody. If you don't hesitate for a moment and think, I'm not sure I want to entrust the post office with this, then you've probably never had experience with the post office. You have that gut feeling every time it's something that you're worried about whether or not it's going to get there, a check, a valuable, whatever it is. Well, if you're that worried about those precious things to you being in the hands of the post office, then aren't you worried about freedom being in the hands of the post office, voting being in the hands of the post office? I don't think anybody that has dealt with the post office feels comfortable with the idea that we're going to hand over, in many ways, our election system to the post office in such a big way and be so open for fraud. So just think practically about it. The president's doing that, and I think Republicans are doing that. I think Democrats see it as an opportunity for fraud. So it's a dangerous situation. Quick break, guys. We'll be right back. We've got more of your questions here on WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
Hi friends, this is Tim Barton of WallBuilders. This is a time when most Americans don't know much about American history or even heroes of the faith, and I know oftentimes for parents, we're trying to find good content for our kids to read, and if you remember back to the Bible, to the book of Hebrews, it has the Faith Hall of Fame, where they outline the leaders of faith that had gone before them. Well, this is something that as Americans, we really want to go back and outline some of these heroes, not just of American history, but heroes of Christianity and our faith as well. I want to let you know about some biographical sketches we have available on our website. One is called the Courageous Leaders Collection. And this collection includes people like Abigail Adams, Abraham Lincoln, Francis Scott Key, George Washington Carver, Susanna Wesley, even the Wright brothers. And there's a second collection called Heroes of History. In this collection, you'll read about people like Benjamin Franklin or Christopher Columbus, Daniel Boone, George Washington, Harriet Tubman. Friends, the list goes on and on. This is a great collection for your young person to have and read, and it's a providential view of American and Christian history. This is available at wallbuilders.com. That's www.wallbuilders.com.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The Constitution of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed, that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press."
We're back on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Foundations of Freedom Thursday today, and a great question. In fact, multiple people have asked this about the mail-in ballots, and so we've been talking about how crazy that idea is and how dangerous that is, that we would entrust our votes with the post office, which we hardly entrust with anything. I mean, most of the time when I mail something, it's like, okay, if it doesn't get there, I can live with it.
Well, and that's why UPS and FedEx and so many other organizations now are in the market, and they're doing very well in the market without having government subsidies, without having the government fund and provide for them, because they have a much better business model. They're much more trustworthy and reliable. And even as we're talking about these mail-in ballots, again, it's important to distinguish, this is not the same thing as an absentee ballot. It's totally different in functionality. It's different the way it works. It's different the fact they have your voter ID number, and all you have to do, there's a lot of differences in how a absentee ballot works from a mail-in ballot. With that being said, the idea of the post office is going to distribute a ballot to every single American eligible, voter age, whatever else. It's a little silly to think that we're going to put all those ballots in the mail, assuming they're safe, when the U.S. Post Office tells us, don't send cash in envelopes because it's not safe to send money via the mail. If it's not safe to send a $5 bill from a grandparent to a grandkid, why do we think it's safe to vote for the president or a senator or a governor or a congressman? Why would it be safe to vote by mail if it's not safe to send a $5 bill in the mail? That doesn't make any sense at all, but this is part of the illogical idea that is being argued today.
And I would say, too, with the post office, and Tim, you just pointed out, it's not nearly as good as all the private entities that are out there that do the same thing. However, the post office is a constitutional function because the Constitution says you're to have post roads for the post office. So the Constitution actually sets the post office aside as something that's constitutional. However, the problem is the federal government is running it like a government agency, not like a business. And so all the contracts they have, all the union stuff, all the overpayment they get, all the non-incentivized stuff, if it was competition, it would be fine. The fact it's constitutional is fine. But if they ran it like a real business, it would be a whole different entity.
And this is not to also be critical of some of our friends who are in the Postal Service, right? Just
including some of our family members who are in the Postal Service.
Just like we talk about, there can be some great teachers in the public school, but the public school system as a whole, the system itself is not a very good system. It's a very broken system. There's a lot of issues and problems in the system, a lot of philosophical problems, etc. Same thing with the post office. There can be some really, really good people in the post office. Again, if we have family members in the post office, we love them. They're great. They've done, we think, a great job because of their character, their work ethic, whatever else. But the system as a whole is not a good system, and it's certainly not something that we should entrust the future of America to the reliability of the post office. That doesn't make very much sense.
Hey, last break, guys. We'll be right back for our final segment of Foundations of Freedom Thursday right here on WallBuilders Live.
President Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
Many of you out there are under stay-at-home orders by your governor or your local health officials, and maybe you're looking for something to do during this time. One of the most important things you can do as a citizen is to make sure that you know your rights, you know when they've been violated, and you're the better prepared to defend and assert them. To do that, you've got to study the Constitution and the history behind it. Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green does exactly that. We take you into the WallBuilders Library, we bring all those resources to life, and then we go out to Philadelphia to Independence Hall, and right there in the room where the Constitution and the Declaration were put together, we bring it to life, we relive it, and we make sure that we as citizens know what our part is in preserving these freedoms for future generations. At this time in our nation, it is so important to know the proper role of government and what we as citizens should be doing at this time. If you haven't done Constitution Alive, check it out at wallbuilders.com. You can get the DVD set there. We'll get it out in the mail to you as soon as we can, and you can study it at home. Or you can go to constitutioncoach.com and become a Constitution Coach today. We've got a free license for you right now where you can sign up as a Constitution host and be the catalyst in your community to bring back these biblical and historical and constitutional values. And what you do is you sign up as a host, and then you get your friends and family together on Zoom. We coach you on how to do it, and you're able to create community and also study the Constitution at the same time. Do this, and we will be able to pick up the pieces on the other side of this crisis and rebuild our nation even stronger than it was before. Check it out today at constitutioncoach.com.
Thomas Jefferson said, "In questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down for mischief by the chains of the Constitution."
We're back on WallBuilders Live. Final segment of Foundations of Freedom Thursday, and the last question coming from Marianne. Is it constitutional for Ms. Pelosi to divert millions of dollars from the stimulus bill to her special interest groups? My thought is that it is designated for the American people and businesses. Our founders must be rolling in their graves with this corruption pushed by our Congress. Okay, guys, so I don't know if it's constitutional or not, but I know it's a standard order of business for Ms. Pelosi. So, yeah, diverting the stimulus money to our special interest groups.
Yeah, and that is the problem. Former U.S. Senator Tom Coburn pointed out every budgeting cycle is how much of this stuff is being expended on things that are not part of what the Constitution authorizes the federal government to do. But Pelosi really takes it to a new level. I mean, Republicans did it just like Democrats. Well, they did it, but not like Democrats, but they did it too, to a lesser degree. But man, where Pelosi does, she's calling the House back into session when something offends her or she sees something as impeding her agenda. I mean, she maybe more than anybody in our lifetime has taken the House and really turned it into a personal agenda kind of organization.
Well, and also it's this idea that you don't let a good crisis go to waste. And she is using this with the idea that we're going to help the economy. We're going to help the American people. We're doing things for the people. And it's almost like Obamacare, where people said, well, you got to pass it before you can really find out what's in it. And people don't know what it is, but they hear what is being said. And of course, you have these cable news networks, whether it be a CNN or MSNBC, or right. I mean, you can kind of pick through the alphabet soup. They are repeating the talking points from Nancy Pelosi, from the Democrat Party, saying this is good for the American people, this is beneficial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just not what is actually contained in this stimulus package. And it's not the benefit that they say it's going to be, but because it's a time of crisis, people go, man, we need help. The economy needs help. People are hurting. People are in trouble. And anytime people are in trouble, this is where the government loves to take that step of usurping power and responsibility, saying, well, we can solve all these problems. We'll just spend more money. And most people, again, don't recognize this is not the way to do it, because whether they're raising taxes to spend more money or whether they're printing more money, either way, it is taking money or devaluing the money we have. It's taking money out of our pocket, and it's not bringing the benefit where we want the benefit to be realized.
But part of the problem with Pelosi's stimulus bill is it's not like the previous ones where that the money went to all Americans. It went to small businesses. It went to individuals, to families. It went to everybody. She, on the other side, has said, no, this is not for the benefit of all Americans. This is for the benefit of groups that are in our camp, like the Planned Parenthoods. Now, I don't know how giving federal money to Planned Parenthood helps a stimulus for the economy. I mean, it's not like the previous stimulus, and we could debate whether those previous stimulus should have gone out like that, whether that's the federal government's role. But this is not for all the American people. This is really focused on the groups that are part of the constituency for the Democrats, and that's just not what it's supposed to be about, and that's what Pelosi really has made it about, which is very unfortunate.
All right, guys, out of time for today. We've got more Foundations of Freedom on our website at wallbuilderslive.com in the archives. And by the way, that first question from Robin, I looked up Prattville, guys. It's outside of Montgomery. That's where it is, right outside of Montgomery, Alabama. So for our Alabama folks out there, we didn't want to leave you hanging on where Prattville is. But thanks for listening to Foundations of Freedom Thursday today. Be sure and visit our website at wallbuilderslive.com. Click on that contribute button, make that one-time or monthly donation. We sure appreciate you coming alongside us. We're going to save this constitutional republic, but it means every citizen being a part of it. Thanks for listening today to WallBuilders Live.
Samuel Adams said, "The liberties of our country and the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending against all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks."
We stand under